He was sold for 2 coins. They said he was going to a good home. But the home turned out to be a black hole in the ground, where instead of the sun there was a smoky lamp, and instead of children's games there were narrow passages that smelled of dust and death. Imagine waking up to the crowing of a rooster somewhere behind the barn, breaking the morning silence. The air is cool, but it already carries the promise of a warm day. The smell of dry grass, wood slowly warming up in the sun, and smoke from the ovens where women bake bread. A ray of light shines through the narrow window in the shutters. It falls on the clay floor in a narrow strip, dividing the room into golden warmth and cold shadow. You sit down, your feet touching the ground, still damp from the night dew. Behind the wall, the sound of a hammer echoes hollowly. Your father is repairing the roof. Nearby, your mother calls the chickens, scatters grain, and speaks quickly, as if in a hurry to get everything done before noon. You run outside. The dew cools your feet. The grass sticks to your skin. Rows of grapevines stretch across the hills, and above them, the olive trees darken. The sun is still low, but it is already painting the treetops gold. Above, you hear the cry of a hawk circling over the field. Your father notices you, raises his head and, without stopping his work, says, "Catch it, son. Catch the ray. Whoever catches it will be happy." You raise your face to the sky and feel the warmth gliding over your skin. At this moment, the world is simple. There is the sun, there is the earth, there is your family. Nothing else matters. Your house is small, 1 room for sleeping and a shed for goats. In the yard stands a large clay amphora filled with water from a spring. You know every path in the area. The short road to the stream, the winding path to the neighbors, the rocky road to the hill where, they say, you can see the sea on a clear day. You have never seen it, but you often imagine it. At the beginning of the 1st century AD, Liguria was part of the Roman Empire, poor but stubborn. Small farmers and shepherds lived here, growing grapes, olives, and grains. Children became workers from an early age. Life in the village was hard but predictable. The greatest threats were hunger, disease, and the taxes demanded by Rome. If the harvest was good, the family had bread, oil, and a little wine. If not, everyone suffered, even the children. The peasants understood that the empire was sustained by taxes and the labor of people like them. But the Roman authorities were distant and alien. Local boys rarely left their valleys. For them, the world was limited to fields, forests, and a few neighboring settlements. The sea remained only a dream, a symbol of something great but unattainable. Just last year, you were running barefoot through the grass, catching rays of sunshine, and now the sun was just burning the earth. That year, winter dragged on, and spring brought cold winds and rains that battered the earth for weeks. When summer came, the sun no longer gave life. It burned everything to the ground. The fields where barley had grown stood yellow-gray, cracked like old clay pots. The grapevines withered, and the olive trees bore small, shriveled fruits. First, the livestock disappeared. The goats and donkeys that fed you milk and helped carry firewood died from a disease that came from nowhere. Then the supplies from the barn began to disappear. Every day, your mother takes a little less bread from the shelf than yesterday and divides it so that it will last until evening. For dinner, there is only a thin piece of bread, sometimes a few olives, if there are any left. Your father is silent at the table. His hands, usually strong and confident, now tremble as he cuts the bread. He often puts his portion in front of you, pretending he is not hungry. But at night you hear him tossing and turning on his straw bed, swallowing his saliva. Imagine, in many Roman families, the death of children from exhaustion was not even officially recorded. It was considered the will of the gods. One day, a stranger comes to the village. His toga is not made of coarse wool like the peasants, but of soft fabric with a purple border, a sign of a man with power and money. A purse hangs from his belt, and silver glitters inside it. He spoke slowly but confidently, each word carefully considered. "I hear that you are going through hard times. I have a proposal. Your boy will find a good home. He will be fed, clothed, and taught a trade. Surely you want a better life for him?" You looked at your father. He did not answer, only clenched his jaw. Your mother stands in the shadows, silently clutching the hem of her tunic. Then the stranger pulls out several silver denarii. The metal glints in the sun, and you see your father's hands tremble as he takes them. You are 10 years old and don't yet understand what is happening. Only when the stranger takes out a set of shackles and the cold iron ring closes around your wrist with a dull click do you feel something break inside you. Your father turns away so as not to look you in the eyes. Your mother raises her hands to her face and begins to cry quietly. You want to say something. Ask where they are taking you, when you will return, if you will see the sea again, but the words stick in your throat. And then you realize for the first time, your childhood is over. In the Roman Empire, the sale or transfer of children into long-term service was a common practice. Formally, parents did not sell their children into slavery. The agreement was presented as a contract for a specific term, sometimes even with a promise of return. But in reality, for most, it was a path to irrevocable bondage. Poor peasants, faced with hunger or tax debts, often gave their children to wealthy citizens or merchants. They promised food, clothing, and education, but in reality, the children became cheap labor or commodities for resale. On paper, such agreements looked legal, and in the eyes of society, even charitable. In reality, they meant a complete loss of freedom and, almost always, a permanent loss of connection to their homes. You take your first steps as if in a fog. The chain connecting your wrists to the others jingles with every movement. The stranger who is now your master leads you down a narrow street to the village exit. You look back one last time. Your mother is standing at the door, her hands covering her face. You cannot see your father. Then a bend in the road hides your house, and the village disappears. A caravan is ahead. About 24 people, men, women, children. All are bound together by a chain that stretches along the narrow village road. Some walk silently, others breathe heavily, some cry quietly. The chain clatters in time with their steps, and the sound quickly begins to pound in your head like hammer blows. The sun rises higher, and each step becomes more difficult. You walk through the hills, past olive groves, then out into open areas where the wind kicks up dust and blows it into your face. A boy of about 15 walks beside you. He is taller and stronger, but his face is serious, even stern. "Don't ask where we're going," he says without turning his head. "You'll find out when it's too late." His name is Lucius, as you will learn later. You are given only 2 meals a day, a handful of barley porridge in the morning and in the evening. You drink water from large wineskins carried by the guards. It is warm and tastes of leather and dust. During the day, you are driven along at a fast pace, and at night you are allowed to lie down on the ground. Some fall asleep immediately, exhausted, while others lie with their eyes open, staring into the darkness. You cannot sleep. Your father's words about the sun and happiness spin around in your head, but now they seem like a distant joke. You are walking westward. You do not know where exactly, but you hear snippets of the guards' conversations. Spain. The word means nothing to you, only frightening you because it is unfamiliar and very distant. Sometimes you pass through cities. The streets are paved with stone, and people in white tunics walk past you, averting their gaze. No one asks where the children are being taken. No one stops. For the first time, you realize that to them you are not people, but part of a commodity being transported from one point to another. The movement of slaves between provinces was an integral part of the Roman economy. Thousands of people, captured during wars or sold into debt, set off on foot across Italy to the ports, and from there by ship to Spain, Africa, or the eastern Mediterranean. Spain, particularly its southern part, was an important source of metals for Rome: silver, copper, and lead. Mining was so extensive that entire areas were transformed into industrial zones, and local settlements fell into decline. In such regions, the demand for labor was enormous, and even children were sent there because they could crawl through narrow tunnels where adults could not fit. The road to such places was a challenge in itself. The heat, lack of water, harsh sleeping conditions, and psychological pressure meant that many did not reach their destination. Death on the road was not considered a tragedy, only a loss of property. When you arrive, it seems that the very earth itself is sick. It is red like a fresh wound and seems to breathe hot, stifling air. Blue clouds of smoke hang over the hills, and from time to time a dull rumbling, like a moan, bursts from the ground. The sun beats down mercilessly, but here, among the red dumps, it does not warm. It only burns. This place is called Rio Tinto. You heard this name from the guard and immediately sensed that there was nothing good about it. All around you can see black openings of mine shafts, like the mouths of monsters waiting for you. They emit cold, dampness, and something sharp that stings your eyes. You are immediately sent to a place where no adult could fit. You children are more convenient for such work. First, you descend a wooden staircase, slippery from moisture, and then crawl on all fours through a narrow tunnel, clutching a small pickaxe in your hands. A lamp hanging at the entrance casts a yellow light, but it quickly disappears into the darkness. There, underground, you experience true darkness for the first time. Not the night in a village where you can see the stars, but a deaf, dense, almost living darkness that presses on your chest. You break the rock, fill your baskets with and pass them on to the narrow mine cage, which pulls them up to the surface. The dust burns your throat, and every breath brings the taste of metal into your lungs. It makes your tongue rough, your lips crack and bleed. In the evenings, you are herded into barracks carved into the hillside. These are damp caves that smell of sweat, mold, and old wounds. The floor is made of clay, which becomes cold and sticky at night. You lie down on the ground. Some people put stones under their heads, others use rolled-up cloaks. In the darkness, you can hear coughing, a hollow, exhausting sound that makes it feel like your chest is about to burst. Lucius works in the neighboring tunnel. When you meet in the evening, he sometimes leans closer and speaks so quietly, as if afraid that the walls are listening. There is a legend here. If you see the sun before you die, your soul will be set free. You don't ask if he believes it, but the words cling to your thoughts like red dust to your skin, and remain there even in your dreams. Rio Tinto was one of the largest metal mining centers in Roman Spain. Silver, copper, lead, all went to the imperial treasury, providing coins, weapons, and jewelry for the Roman elite. But this wealth came at a price. Archaeologists who have studied the region have found hundreds of children's skeletons with twisted spines, worn knee joints, and signs of heavy metal poisoning. Children began working here at the age of 8 or 10, and most did not live to see adulthood. It is difficult for modern people to imagine that children's hands could break stones for years in suffocating tunnels. Today, we are outraged when we hear about the exploitation of children in poor countries, but back then, in times often idealized as the golden age of Rome, it was the norm. The empire did not care about lives, only mines, ships, and the gold in its temples. And it was children like Marco who paid for this grandeur with their only irreplaceable resource, their own lives. Time dissolves in the mine. You don't see the sun rise or set. You don't know what day or month it is. There was no yesterday or tomorrow here, only today stretching endlessly. The only things that change are the fatigue that becomes heavier than stone and the cough that tears at your chest more fiercely with each passing week. You live to the rhythm of the pickaxe. Once, again. Then a short pause, a sip of warm, bitter water from a wineskin passed by the overseer. And again the blows. In the darkness, the sounds seem louder than they really are. Sometimes, when you are sent to work closer to the ventilation shafts, a thin, tiny ray of light breaks through the darkness. You freeze, staring at it until the guards start shouting. In those moments, you imagine that above you is not red hot or dust, but a blue sea. That it smells of salt, not lead. That the wind brings coolness, not the hot stench of the slag heaps. Once, when you return to the barracks, you tell Lucius about it. He looks at you as if he has already seen everything you have to go through, and quietly replies, "Maybe you'll be lucky. Maybe you'll see your last son." There was no mockery or hope in his voice, just a statement of fact. You don't ask if he believes in the legend himself. It seems that here in Rio Tinto, no one believes in anything. But you keep those words to yourself. Over time, the legend becomes your only treasure. Here, you have nothing of your own. Not even your name belongs to you. But the dream of seeing the sun again, in all its glory, and not just a narrow glimmer through a crack, is something that no guard can take away. For those who worked in the mines of the ancient world, there was almost no hope of returning to the surface. Children and adults were brought here until they could hold a tool in their hands, and left until they were no longer fit for work. When their strength ran out, they were replaced by others, and the previous ones simply disappeared, without a grave, without a name, without a mention in any records. Myths and legends like the one Marco heard played a strange role. They gave the illusion of choice. In a world where life was worth no more than a piece of, or the idea that one could go free through the sun was perhaps the only way to stay sane. A modern listener might think these are just children's fantasies. But imagine yourself in darkness, where you live for months, with no colors except black and red, and no smells except dust and sweat. In such a place, even the simplest image, a bright ray of light hitting your face, becomes not just hope, but the reason you force yourself to live another day. The day begins like many others. The dull sound of picks, the clatter of baskets, the shouts of the overseers urging you on. You work deeper than usual in a new tunnel that smells of fresh wood. The supports were put in place only a few days ago. The air is heavy like in an oven. The lamps are smoking, and their light is dim, like a sick eye. You and Lucius are working close to each other. His hands are moving quickly, but you can see that he is barely standing. At first, you hear a soft crack, as if something deep inside the wood has broken. Then a second, louder one. The overseer turns around, but doesn't have time to say anything. A sudden crash shatters the air. The ceiling shakes, dust flies, and you instinctively fall to your knees, covering your head. The wooden supports crack, and stones fall from the darkness. Lamps fall, kerosene engulfs the flames, and suddenly there is almost complete darkness, with only flashes of smoke and sparks. You hear screams, some sharp, others muffled, as if they were being choked by dust. When you raise your head, you see Lucius. He is lying on his side, one leg pinned under a heavy piece of debris. His hands are shaking, he is coughing, and dark spots of blood appear on his lips. He looks at you through the dust and whispers, "Run upstairs. Catch your son." You start crawling toward a small crack between the rocks that you can see through the chaos. It leads to an old tunnel that you used before. The air is thick, and every breath hurts as if you were swallowing hot sand. The rocks scratch your hands and knees, your back burns from the blows, but you crawl forward, clinging to every ledge. Somewhere behind you, someone else is screaming, but the voices are muffled by dust and the rumble of falling debris. Only one thing is pulsing in your head, the light ahead. A small, flickering, but real light. Collapses in the Rio Tinto mines were so frequent that Roman documents even had special terms to describe these events. They usually wrote, "Loss of manpower due to unexpected collapse of ceilings." It was soulless, official language that hid the true essence, the death of people whose names no one recorded and whose bodies often remained under the rubble forever. For slaves and hired workers, such accidents were the end without publicity, without mourning, without a funeral. History has not preserved their faces. If it weren't for archaeological finds, fragments of wooden supports, burnt lamps, bones with pieces of or between the fingers, we wouldn't even know they existed. But sometimes, very rarely, someone broke free from the darkness. And then the legend of the last son became reality. Not as a happy ending, but as a brief moment of freedom before life faded away. You crawl through dust and debris, swallowing hot, bitter airborne dirt. Every movement feels like your last. Your lungs are burning, your ears are ringing, and dark spots are flashing before your eyes. You grab a stone ledge, pull yourself up a little more, and suddenly you feel the pressure of the darkness ease. There was an opening ahead. No more than a crack between two boulders, but a golden ray was shining through it. It trembled in a cloud of dust, but even so, it was alive. You brace yourself with your shoulder, scratch your hands until they bleed, push the rocks aside, and break free. You are blinded. The sun hits your eyes so hard that you instinctively close them, but the light still seeps through your eyelids. Warm, burning, real. You fall to your knees on the slope of the hill, where the ground is covered with red dust, and breathe deeply. The air is hot, but there is no metal in it, only dry grass and the distant smell of smoke from the guards' bonfires. You sit with your head thrown back, staring at the sky. There are no walls, no lamps, no screams from the guards. Only endless golden light pouring down from above. You remember Lucius' words, and smile. Perhaps you have caught your son after all. Your body relaxes, and you can no longer fight the fatigue. You don't have the strength to get up, but you don't want to. You lie on the warm ground, and the sun floods you, washing away the pain, hunger, and fear. You feel everything around you dissolving into gold. Death from suffocation, exhaustion, or poisoning in the mines was commonplace. Those who survived were left with ruined lungs and a short and painful life. But for those who had lived in darkness for years, even a few minutes in the sun could be the most precious moment of their entire existence. In Rome, no one spoke of these people. They were not heroes. They did not become part of the myths and victory stories of the empire. Their names were not carved in stone. But perhaps in that brief moment when the ray touched their faces, they were freer than anyone in the heart of Rome. He was not found immediately. After the collapse, the guards spent a long time clearing the rubble, pulling away stones, and extracting those who could still move. Marco lay a little away from the scene of the disaster, on a slope where he had managed to crawl. The guard who stumbled upon him bent down, looked at his face, shaded by golden light, and, realizing that the boy was dead, spat to the side. Then he simply walked on. The sun slowly descended toward the horizon, painting the red dust copper. No one buried Mark. No one lit a lamp. His body was left there on the slope for the night and the wind to do their work. Many centuries passed. The land of Rio Tinto, devastated and poisoned, survived the fall of Rome, the arrival of other peoples, and new wars. But its interior still held memories. When archaeologists were clearing one of the old tunnels, they found the bones of a child with a twisted spine and dark spots from metal in the bone tissue. In his hands was a small piece of stone, clenched as if it were something important. Was it Marco? They will never know. His name was lost like thousands of others. But the legend of the last son lived on after him. It was passed on, whispered by other children who were brought here. And perhaps among them was someone who also came out onto the slope, took a deep breath, and caught his last ray of sunshine. We often admire the grandeur of Rome, its roads, temples, aqueducts. But we forget that the gold of these temples, the silver on the coins, and the bronze of the statues were mined by hands that no one intended to protect. Rome's power stood on the shoulders of those who were not considered human. Slaves, prisoners, children. Today, when we see ancient coins in a museum or photographs of marble forums, we do not smell the heavy scent of dust and blood, nor do we hear the clanking of chains and coughing in the darkness. But we must remember, behind every shiny surface is someone's life, broken for the sake of imperial glory. Marco left nothing behind but this memory. And perhaps it is this memory that is his true sun, still shining in the darkness for those who want to remember.